5 Live Formula One.
So we are about to go into practice session number 2. Hopefully we're going to get some running in this one, because we had 2 red flags. We had rain in the first practice session, and now at Hungary we've got much brighter prospects ahead, with not quite blue skies but less grey skies, a dry track because it's dried out very quickly, and the cars will be going out for hopefully plenty of on-track action for what's going to be another 1 hour practice session in this 11th race of the series, the Hungaroring. So you're listening to me, Chris Hartley. We've got Jack Aitken, ex-Williams and Renault reserve driver, with us, and a man that's raced in a Formula 1 Grand Prix as well, and also been a race winner around here at the Hungaroring. F1's chief writer for the BBC, Andrew Benson, and Rosanna Tennant here to talk you through free practice 2 here at Budapest. And as I say, it was a pretty lively start to the session, with all the talk about Sergio Perez having lots of pressure put upon him at the moment, with his qualifying performances in particular not being great. He went out and within 20 seconds on turn 4 on a dry track at the time with a few spits of rain, he put a wheel on the grass and put his Red Bull into the barriers, damage to the front left corner, and that was the end of his session essentially. Then the rain came, others went off, but nothing serious. We had a spin for Carlos Sainz, who kissed the barrier. Valtteri Bottas had an off as well, but there was a lot of dead track, and it was only really in the last 10 minutes of the session that we saw any activity, with cars going out on the intermediate tyre, and George Russell in the Mercedes setting the fastest time in free practice 1 with a 1:38.795. So the cars getting ready to go out for the second free practice session after a dramatic weekend at Silverstone and a very different circumstances here at the Hungaroring, a circuit which requires lots of traction, rhythm as a driver as well. It's only got one short straight really, and it's going to be perhaps a different set of results, particularly behind the top 2 Red Bulls potentially. They're looking for their 250th podium finish, Red Bull Racing, Rosanna. The question, I suppose the big question is, are they going to get the 250th podium this weekend, or are they going to get the 250th and the 251st? Because there's lots of question marks over the number 2 driver at the moment.
There are some questions, aren't there, especially after Sergio Perez's sort of bump with the wall during FP1. So that was very tricky, as you've mentioned already. I think he needs to bounce back stronger in this second session. It looks like it's going to be dry. Word in the pit lane is it will be dry for the entirety of this session. And the teams, especially Checo, of course, they need that time to get some dry running data, because the first session was so wet. So it's going to be interesting to see which tyres they go for, how they blend a bit of short run and long run. Obviously, normally it'd be long runs in this particular session, but because it was a little bit scrambled earlier on, I think we're going to see some different strategies at play, aren't we, Jack?
Yeah, lots of teams, as you say, going to be playing catch-up here. Of course, plenty of teams have brought upgrade packages this weekend as well for this track, because it is quite sensitive to the amount of downforce that you can put on the car, not so sensitive to drag, because, as was mentioned, we have a very short straight here, and the rest of it, you're pretty much turning left or right all the way from the first corner into the last corner. This Hungaroring circuit, Monaco without the walls, almost, you could say. I've already used that line, like a shoddy work, I'm sorry.
I'm just seeing Sergio Perez being strapped into his Red Bull, so it looks like they've got it sorted. And we were talking earlier on, guys, weren't we, that actually, even though it looked like quite a big impact, the damage wasn't that huge to his RB19. So they've used their break between FP1 and FP2 to get the car together, and I'd imagine he'd like to be first in the queue heading out of the pit lane. Yeah,
he'll be keen to get some clean laps in. I mean, the biggest damage will have been to his pride, won't it? I mean, as you said, Chris, it's trying times for the driver in that second seat already, and we've seen it before, those struggles in the second Red Bull seat paired up against such a formidable opponent in Max Verstappen. And he's quite lucky really, because with the rain of that first session, he hasn't really lost out anything here. He can do a reset, get going again, have a clean FP2 and FP3, and it will almost be like nothing's happened. Of course, that's not the case, and the Red Bull bosses are well aware of that, but for the performance of this weekend, he might get away with it.
Yeah, absolutely right. If you got to miss one session, that was the one to miss, really, wasn't it? We only had 11 cars that set a lap time in the end, and unless we get a wet qualifying and a wet race, which forecast-wise looks less likely, although you can never predict the weather, ask anybody at Silverstone. It does seem that he's not really going to miss out too much there. We saw a number of drivers, including his teammate, actually, Max Verstappen, that didn't go out at all in terms of setting a full lap time. Impressive, once again, with the McLaren second and fourth, just like they were at Silverstone in the race, but it was Oscar Piastri who topped the times a couple of times, actually, in that last 5 minutes. That was the best of the McLaren. He was second behind George Russell and just about 3.5 tenths of a second behind him with a 1 minute 39.154 for what it's worth. But they're not particularly quick lap times, because when we're looking at qualifying and last year's pole time, we're looking at being down in the mid 1 minute 18s, Rosanna. So whether it'll be a useful session, whether there will be any more damp running across the rest of the weekend, we'll wait and see. But for now, it looks much better, doesn't it?
It does. It looks nice and dry at the moment. Cars piling out of the pit lane. Max Verstappen still with his orange Red Bull cap on and in the garage, not in a hurry to get into the car.
Yeah, well, I mean, the rain has only really just left in sort of the last couple of hours, and that means that the track's still going to be quite green and quite greasy. There's no rubber that's really gone down yet as a result of it being a wet first session, so the track's not really in a representative state yet. And he's quite happy. He's in the luxurious position of feeling quite confident at the moment. So he's happy to let his rivals go out and lay some rubber down on the track, let the track bed in a little bit, as it were, and then go out and do his laps.
Just seen Lance Stroll being let go from the garage at Aston Martin. They were being quite coy with their rear wing. It was covered up with some black plastic bag, and now they put Flovis all over the back of it. So a new part there, potentially. I
think it was just to maybe avoid it dripping everywhere, because that Flovis stuff is pretty nasty, and I've had it when you're in the cockpit that they will cover the driver with a bin bag to try and stop it getting all over your suit and helmet and visor. So maybe just trying to keep things a bit cleaner.
So the reason the Flovis will be on that car is because Aston Martin have got a new engine cover this weekend with more cooling capacity, because it's often hot in Hungary. So they'll be having a look at what effect the airflow off that engine cover has over the rear wing, Rosanna, for the rest of the session, or for this initial part of the session.
Of course, more cooling often means a slower car. It's a sacrifice that you have to make. If you don't have to cool the car more, then you want to close up those vents as much as possible, because it reduces drag, has a cleaner flow, etc. So that's a compromise that they're having to make, really.
Fernando Alonso saying that he felt a bit more hopeful about this weekend, because they have slightly fallen away from that hype train that everyone was busy getting on for Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin at the very start of the season. Quite rightly so, the results were speaking for themselves, but it has slightly ebbed recently, hasn't it?
Well, what we don't know, Rosanna, is whether that's to do with Aston Martin falling behind in the development race, or whether it's to do with the car's sort of suitedness, if you like, to specific circuits. Having said that, they were strong at pretty much every circuit for the first part of the season, and they weren't strong in Austria and Silverstone, or less strong. But actually, if you look to the Spanish Grand Prix, they also had a weak weekend there. And that's a very similar sort of characteristic in the medium and high-speed corners, same as Austria, same as Silverstone fundamentally. So there is a trend there, and we have to wait and see this weekend to get a chance to have an idea of whether the upgrades on the Mercedes, for example, the upgrades on the Ferrari have moved them ahead of Aston Martin, or whether Aston Martin's upgrades have kept pace. It's just that their car wasn't suited to those faster circuits.
We've had Williams 1-2 at the moment. Alex Albon went quickest with his first lap in these dry conditions, 1:19.660, and then his teammate Logan Sargent, who was impressed with at Silverstone 2 weeks ago, wasn't too far away from being in the points. The American went quicker by 0.2 tenths of a second, and Lando Norris has just topped the times now with a very low 1:19.044. One of the things they'll be keen to do now that we have got a track is work out what's going on with the tyres, because the three compounds here are slightly softer than the compounds that were used last year. So rather than the C1, C2 and C3, the hardest three compounds are the C2, C3 and C4. So the C2s are the hard tyre this weekend, the C3s are the hard tyres this weekend, the C4s are the mediums, and the C5s are the softs. And there's also different tyre allocation this weekend, something they're going to trial here and at Monza in Italy. Rather than having 13 sets of tyres available for each team, there'll be 11 sets of tyres, as Formula One looks to start to reduce costs as much as it can, but also have a look at sustainability as a real factor in Formula One. So they're going to trial it out, less sets of tyres. That means they're going to have 3 sets of hards, 4 sets of mediums, and only 4 sets of softs, which is half of what they normally have. They normally have 8 sets of soft tyres. And the other key thing is that when we get to qualifying tomorrow, the new rule this weekend is that in Q1 they'll have to use hard tyres, in Q2 mediums, and in Q3 softs. The race won't change, there'll be no change to the race rules. And at the moment we've only got a couple of cars, which are the Williams, that have been out on the soft tyre. Most of the rest of the field have gone out on the mediums, except for Kevin Magnussen, who's gone out on the hard tyre.
Yeah, it's the most interesting part of all of that for me at least will be watching how people handle the first part of qualifying with the hard tyre, because it's a tyre that you I don't think we ever see people usually trying to qualify on. It's a tyre that you use to try and extend your performance during the race stints. Obviously, it's a more durable tyre, but that comes at the cost of outright grip. So trying to get those fired up, especially if it's going to be a slightly cold or slightly damp session, will be very tricky. And you might see people moving away from the classic, going out, do a 1 or 2 intense push lap run to try and get the most out of a tyre. You might have to extend that out to 3, 4, 5 laps before the tyres really come up to temperature and start working. Of course, when we get to the pointy end of qualifying for Q3, it'll be business as normal with the soft tyre.
So that could mean a pretty busy first qualifying session with lots of traffic and a few trip hazards there for the drivers, couldn't it? Yeah,
traffic will be even more difficult because usually the cool-down laps are an opportunity for everybody to reshuffle themselves and get in order. It can be a time when you have big pace difference between the cars, which could cause its own issues. But if you're a Max Verstappen and you're running a second lap quicker than half of the field, and everybody just keeps running round and round and round and round, there's no opportunity for them to get out of the way for you, and you might find yourself tripping over those slower cars, and they've got no obligation to get out of your way. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, what strategies people employ, but something completely new for F1.
And you've raced around here at the Hungaroring quite a few times, been successful here. It is a track where they're not all slow corners by any means. There's some quick corners out there, lots of medium speed corners, but the end of the lap through the final sector, there's a couple of sort of more stop-start corners, and that's quite hard on the tyres, isn't it, in terms of you need good traction out of the slower corners here.
Yeah, particularly when you get into the last sector. You just come for a very intense section, which we're now watching Lando Norris navigate, where you do go left, right, left, right, left, right for about 4 or 5 corners, culminating in a very, very fast corner. So the tyres are screaming hot by the time you get to sector 3 in turn 12, which is a big braking zone, and then you've got 2 corners that seems go on forever to finish the lap. They're really long apexes. You've got to be super patient with both the brake and the throttle. It's very easy to lock a front or to get a little bit of wheel spin, and quite frustrating at times, but they demand a lot of technical prowess both from car and driver, and that's why a lot of drivers enjoy the challenge.
So Logan Sargent into the 118s now, 118.836. Well, last year in FP2 the quickest time was the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, which was a 118.4. It's only 4 tenths quicker. Bottas has gone second, the Williams on the soft tyre, the Alfa is on the medium, and Lando Norris has gone third on the medium tyre as well, only 4 thousandths of a second slower than Bottas. And then Alex Albon there in 4th place. We should probably talk about Alex, because we talked a lot about McLaren and Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri at Silverstone, but certainly one of the real stars, Rosanna, 2 weeks ago at the British Grand Prix were Williams, but especially Alex Albon, because he was up there in the top 3 in all 3 practice sessions, and then dealt very well with pressure in qualifying, when at one point he lost his best lap time for track limits. He was stone last. He had 1 chance to go and get a lap, and he went 7th quickest and made it out of the first part of qualifying.
Yeah, we were all getting excited about the Williams pace, Alex Albon's pace, Logan's pace as well up there as well. But it was Andrew Benson, I think, he was telling everyone to calm their farm and not get too carried away. But actually, Williams seemed to have found a little bit of something. Not sure how that will actually come into play this weekend, but Alex especially seems incredibly comfortable, driving incredibly well, and seems to have found a sort of sweet spot in his career at the moment. Obviously, Logan Sargent a little bit behind. I know right now he's at the top of the standings, but this track's going to get a little bit faster, I'm sure. But Alex is a great person, I think, for Logan to be learning off, even though Alex is relatively young in his Formula One career. But it's nice watching a driver kind of find their feet and start to feel really comfortable.
Yeah, he's young, but he's actually quite experienced, isn't he, Alex? He's been around the block, so to speak, in F1 enough. He's been in a top team with Red Bull. and has spent a few seasons, doing what he does best. So, as you say, a great opportunity for Logan to learn and come on. He is starting to show a bit, some signs of improvement, you could say. I think he's had a tough time, a bit of an up and down season so far. But it'll be an interesting second half of the year for the Williams boys.
And of course, Alex Albon has been on the receiving end of what Nick de Vries has just experienced at AlphaTauri. And you do see these drivers bounce back, they take some time away, they come back, and perhaps just different teams suit different drivers. And it does seem like the Williams environment suits Alex.
Chris, I made a brake balance change there and he hit with a front mode change.
So that's George Russell's radio and feedback on a couple of tweaks and changes that he's made. So this is what it's all about, really, in free practice, isn't it? Trying things out, testing things. I wanted to ask you, actually, Jack, because you've been in a couple of Formula One practice sessions. What do you go in with? I mean, it's going to be different for every race, but you must go into a practice session with a plot of what you're going to do, a programme of things to run through. But when you get a session that's pretty much ruined, like the first practice session, how is that going to affect things for the teams?
Yeah, you basically tear up the plan from the morning, I think, and start again from zero. So it becomes a case of prioritising. So what's most important? Probably for them, it's going to be validating the packages that they've brought that are new for this round. Any test items that they were particularly interested in that showed promise from the modelling that they've done prior to coming to the racetrack. And of course letting the driver get up to speed, but I mean most of these guys they don't need that much time to do that, so it'll be straight into the heavy lifting. But with regards to stuff like the switch changes that George was complaining that they're not quite doing what he expected them to, a lot of that can be sort of planned in advance, but then equally there's a few tools that the drivers will like to do on the fly themselves, and it'll be personal preference. So you get very comfortable with that in a pretty short amount of time.
Lewis Hamilton's headed out on his first out lap. Still, both the Red Bulls and both the Ferraris are in the pit lane at the moment. Obviously, one car from each of those teams sustained damage in the first session. Sergio Perez was spoken about hitting the wall, and then Carlos Sainz also getting beached in the first session. But I imagine that damage has been sorted out. So why are they taking their time, Jack?
It's just track conditions. I mean, because of the track conditions, as we mentioned before, not being quite there yet, but also crucially this weekend they are very tight on tyres. So if they don't feel like it's going to be especially helpful to run in this sort of green state of track, then they'll happily save those tyres and use them later, because even with FP1 being effectively washed out, they're going to be counting those softs and mediums pretty closely for these later stages of qualifying.
So Lewis Hamilton on his first proper lap of the whole day, really, because he was one of the drivers that didn't set it. He went out on the track, but he didn't set a lap time in free practice one. He's trying to get into the 118s if he can. He's unlikely to, because the top two are the only two on the soft tyre, and Hamilton in the Mercedes on the medium at the moment. He's coming into one of the crests now, coming into that final sector, and Hamilton brakes, turns right through turn 12, and just a little bit wide, but it's all under control. Drops it down now to just over 100 kilometres an hour and winds his way up towards the final turn at turn 14, the one you've really got to get right here in the race, because it provides a big opportunity to overtake when you get to the end of the start-finish straight into turn 1, into the DRS zone, and he's 0.9 of a second down on that first lap. That's not bad, actually, and he slows it down straight away, so just the one flying lap, but Hamilton 13th place with that, and a high 1 minute 19, but on the medium tyre.
There's quite a large spread of lap times at the moment when you look at the fastest cars to the slowest, and even where various cars are placed in the order, and it all sort of screams that things are not truly representative yet. People are still finding their feet. George Russell, for example, is down at the bottom of the timesheets, which is obviously not normal for him, but just getting a feel for things. And the track is going to be getting better and better every lap, and George does improve up to P10 with a 119.5, 7 tenths off the pace. Daniel Ricciardo is another one who's a bit further in the deep end than most, of course, coming in for his first race weekend. He's been chipping away at the times over the last 5-10 minutes, and just bringing that down from being just over 2 seconds off the pace to now 1 second off the pace, still down in 15th, but making progress.
Joe Guanyu on track at the moment, and fifth quickest, the fourth and fifth. Actually, the two Alphas. Bottas is, in fact, only 66 thousandths of a second quicker than his teammates. So Sargent's quickest. Norris is second now, 76 thousandths of a second between them, and Norris on the medium tyre as well, which in theory shouldn't be as quick. Albon down to third, Bottas and Joe, and then Alonso rounding out the top six. Piastri is in seventh, and then Ocon in eighth.
I think, Jack, what's interesting about Ricciardo's times, you're right, he has been chipping away, but he's already only 4 tenths behind teammate Yuki Tsunoda, which is not bad after, what has he done? 8 laps, so that's 4 flying laps. It's not bad.
Yeah, no, it's not. But he's an experienced... It's not like... If it was Liam Lawson, you'd be like, yeah, that's a good job, because it'd be his first session in. This is Daniel Ricciardo, you know, race winner, many-time podium visitor. I kind of would expect that from him. He's been doing laps in the sim, he's been doing testing. I think that, you know, really the alarm bells will only start ringing for Tsunoda when he starts to get quicker than him.
I completely agree. The only caveat I would say is which Daniel Ricciardo has come back. Is it the one that was at Red Bull, or is it the one that was at McLaren? Yeah. We don't know that yet, do we? That
is very true.
You know, one of the problems potentially for Daniel is this AlphaTauri is meant to be a bit tricky to drive going into braking zones. The back end of the car gets a little bit loose, doesn't it, as the ride height lifts, and he's a confidence driver, and he's in a Red Bull and an 8-time race winner and a driver that can really attack on the brakes. He's happy, but one of the problems at McLaren was that the back of the car didn't suit him. He didn't feel confident. He said, I've lost all my confidence driving the car, and the AlphaTauri might not be much better for him.
Jack, I have a question. When you used to do practice sessions for F1 and then jump back into an F2 car on the same weekend, I think that happened, I'm thinking, yeah. Would that be similar to what Daniel might be experiencing now, having driven the Red Bull car recently, now jumping into the AlphaTauri? Is it that kind of level of difference, do you reckon, between this incredible car that Red Bull have?
I don't think it'll be quite as severe as that, his Norris.
Still quite a bit of bottoming. I don't think it's hurting anything though. Okay, understood.
Yeah, all that skimming that you could hear on the sound was at the bottom of Norris's car going to work against the tarmac. And we're getting a replay of Zhao getting blocked by Russell. Not too happy about that. The hand goes up. Yeah, the Red Bull compared to the AlphaTauri, I don't think it'll be quite as big a jump as going from F1 to F2. But it's certainly a step down, and actually it's going to be less the lap time difference and more the characteristics of the car, because if, as we say, the AlphaTauri is quite tricky to drive, and particularly in that area that he is so sensitive to in the braking zone, that'll be way more of an effect on the driver than well, what is it, half a second to a second difference between Red Bull and the AlphaTauri. So yeah, we'll see if it'll be interesting to see his comments after today's sessions. I think that'll be really telling.
But you don't get in the AlphaTauri, drive it like you were driving the Red Bull. You have to adapt slightly, I would imagine.
You will have to a little bit, yeah. Every car has its own little quirks and personality and strengths and weaknesses, so you cannot just copy and paste a driving style. So, yeah, he'll be alive to that, I'm sure, but it'll be interesting to see if he does struggle a bit.
Sergio Perez is out on track, and hurrah, he's gone further than he went last time without crashing the car, so all good. He's completed a lap, he's gone 6th quickest, so breathe a sigh of relief after that, because qualifying this year, which he's got to build up towards tomorrow, he's really got to get that right. His teammate Max Verstappen has averaged 3rd on the grid this year, and would have been higher but for a couple of problems on average pace. Perez's average grid position is 9th on the grid, and lately it has not been good. Monaco stone last after crashing out of the top 10 in qualifying in Spain, out of the top 10 in Canada and Austria, and then 15th again at Silverstone 2 weeks ago, and this is a track where he missed out on the top 10 last year as well.
You know how we always go on about if Verstappen wasn't in this championship, it'd be really close. Well, from 1st to 10th, it's 4 tenths of a second at the moment. Yeah. And we've got all manner of cars in there, so yeah, it's kind of proving the point. But he is going to set a lap time pretty soon. I think he has just started his first flying lap as we join him going through turn 3, looking pretty serene. Sparks kicking up from the back of the Red Bull. He's heading up to turn 4 now. Green sector 1, but not purple. There's hope yet.
And both the Red Bulls gone on the soft tyre as well, the red-walled tyre. So Verstappen has got that sort of aggressive body language of the car. He rattles the curbs going out through the chicane, through the left at 8 into turn 9 now. We're looking at the helmet cam as well, inside the helmet of the world champion as he goes on the attack here for his first ever pole position at the Hungaroring, making his way into the latter stages. He's a couple of tenths down on Sargent's time through the split, and he's coming up into the final sector now to see if he can gain a little bit of that back. Perez went 6th quickest on the same tyre, the soft tyre, so now makes his way, sweeps through into the final turn at 14, accelerates out, sparks fly from the back of the car as he kisses the curb, and over the line he goes and completes his first lap, and it puts him in 2nd place.
He kind of built through that lap, because the first sector he was looking pretty, I don't want to say cautious, pretty calm, pretty laid back, gave away a couple of attempts a bit more to the purple sector times, and then sector 2 he pretty much matched the fastest lap time, and then in sector 3 he ate into the fastest time and gained a couple of attempts back, and I'm sure when he goes out for his next lap it will be even quicker, but looking very calm, very serene when we were on board with the visor cam there.
Interestingly, just noticed that Sargent in the Williams has gone out on the medium tyre now, but set the absolute best middle sector. The lap was down, no, in fact, he's gone up again at 1:18.836. So Verstappen out there. Hamilton on the attack now, and he takes it all over the curbs as well, the Mercedes, as sparks trail from the back of the car. British driver with 8 Grand Prix victories here at the Hungaroring, most pole positions as well. Likes this circuit, likes all of them, doesn't he? He flies around them, but hopeful of maybe a repeat podium this weekend, the Mercedes. You've got Carlos Sainz out on track as well. He comes out of turn 14, and that puts Hamilton straight up into the top 4 behind Sargent, Verstappen and Norris. And also an improvement for Carlos Sainz, who goes 6th just behind Alex Albon's Williams.
Especially in the last sector here, you get so much, you're asking the car to do so much, because you have to have a long time where you're on the brakes and turning into the corner, and then again a long time where you're on the throttle and turning for the last part of the corner as well. There's a lot of combined effort going on for the tyre, and you can only ever ask the tyre to do so much. So if you're asking for it to do 2 things at once, like accelerate and turn, as Charles Leclerc is through the last corner now very well, you can only ask it to do like 50% of both, if you see what I mean. It has a capacity, and this is the kind of circuit that really challenges those cars and sort of seeks out any weakness. So it's very, very good test for the chassis and downforce packages that we have here.
We're looking at Logan Sargent just going quite slowly at the moment on his medium tyre, having switched to the Williams, still top of the times when he did on his soft tyre. The Williams with a special livery for the 2nd weekend running to mark the 800th Grand Prix for Williams, which was meant to be at Silverstone originally, but because of the cancellation of the Imola Grand Prix, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, it's become this, the 800th race. There is 1 or 2 quibbles over the stats of the history of exactly what race number 800 is, and some say that have actually gone past 800 when back in the day the team switched for a while, but before it became Williams Grand Prix Engineering. But this is the 800th livery. It's got the Union flag emblazoned upon the back of the car. It did at Silverstone. It's tweaked slightly for this one on the big 800 on the side of the car as well, for the team that's won 9 Constructors' Championship titles. Alex Albon, we've been talking him through to the quickest time now as well, with a 1:18.377 on the medium, to go nearly half a second quicker than Sargent went on the soft tyre. So that's a pretty impressive lap, that.
Yeah, Sargent's just starting another lap now. Alex let him through pretty much immediately after setting that lap time, so a little bit of good coordination between the 2 Williams. But at what stage are we going to start talking about Williams actually being a threat this weekend to the higher points paying positions? I daren't say a podium, but as the track's rubbering in and getting more representative, they're still at the pointy end, even if it is with the softer compound for Sargent.
Let's ask Andrew what he thinks, because Silverstone, the high-speed corners, the straight line speed of the Williams seem to be impressive. But I mean, they made a good start here, Andrew, on a totally different sort of circuit, and the lap time compared to last year looks favourable, doesn't it?
Indeed, yeah. I mean, look, at Silverstone, Rosanna called me out a bit earlier on.
We were getting excited.
And I wasn't.
No, exactly.
Or not as excited. he did a good job, but he qualified 8th. Let's keep it in perspective. You were getting excited about him being 3rd in practice, and they are 1st and 2nd in practice now.
It's a delight to see anyone else
Albon
at the top, Andrew.
Yeah. Williams don't expect this circuit to suit them. Their car it's a low drag car, basically, which basically means low downforce. So it doesn't have, or it hasn't so far had, as Lance Stroll goes to the top, and then Nico Hülkenberg, just to put everything into perspective, Rosanna. So it doesn't have the capability to have as much downforce on as some of the other cars, and this is a track where you need maximum downforce. So I think if Williams suddenly have a high downforce package that works as well as the Aston Martin, for example, or as the Ferrari or the Mercedes, it will be a surprise to them as much as it will be to me.
Well, I have to say, by all accounts, from inside the Williams camp, they didn't really know 100% exactly why they were fast at Silverstone.
Is that right?
Which, I mean, it's great that they were fast at times, as you say, not perhaps as fast as we were getting excited about, but it is always slightly worrying when you're not sure how you quite achieved that, and it then, of course, becomes much more difficult to replicate. Yuki Tsunoda's just been the first man under 118.0 over 117.9. Before that, though, he was only half a tenth or a tenth up on Ricciardo. They'd really closed the gap between the two of them. So once Daniel does his soft tyre run, we'll get another comparison there.
What's interesting about what you just said there, Jack, is that McLaren also didn't expect this bodywork change that's moved them really far forward in Austria and Silverstone to be as big an upgrade as it turned out to be on the track. So maybe that's a bit of a theme, and actually, well, the Mercedes one doesn't seem to have worked as well, does it? But I don't think within Mercedes they were particularly excited about what the immediate performance step they were going to make with that Monaco upgrade. It was more about what potential it might unlock down the line. We've yet to see the full evidence of that, although they are, if you look at the trend graphs, performance graphs of overall performance, percentage from pole and everything, Mercedes are inching forward slowly.
So Tsunoda with the quickest time, Hülkenberg 2nd, Verstappen and Stroll 3rd and 4th, all of them on the soft tyre. So the pole position time last year for George Russell was a 117.3. We're already down to the 117.9, so pretty good progress. That bodes well for if we get a dry qualifying tomorrow, an even quicker lap time. So Alonso we're watching now, and I don't know about you, Jack, but I always love watching Fernando Alonso because you never get anything less than 100% commitment, do you? Whether it's practice,
110.
qualifying, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and he's all over the curves going through Sector 2. He's now in Sector 3 to finish off the lap, and he's a couple of tenths up on the fastest at the moment. He hasn't set any outright purple sectors, but he is up, and it's pretty clean for the last couple of corners, so I'm expecting this will be P1. And it's not. I'm wrong. P3. Why? I've just picked you up, Fernando, and you've just done a dud Sector 3 to prove me wrong.
Not bad. Hamilton's 7th, so he's the 2nd best on the medium tyre behind Albon. And we've got Kevin Magnussen has just improved up to 7th as well. So most of the top 10 on the soft tyre, all of the top 5 on the soft tyre. But yeah, Alonso should go well here, 20 years after he got his first ever Formula 1 Grand Prix victory here at the Hungaroring.
I was interested listening to him in the press conference talk about that was the moment his private life got eradicated, basically, and he lost all privacy. But hey, it's been a wonderful life, I imagine, since then.
It's 10 years, a decade since he's been on the podium here as well, when he was a Ferrari driver, and there's a reasonably good chance he might get on the podium this weekend. I think he's got certainly a better chance than he had at Silverstone.
Get that hype train running again.
Yeah.
Now Norris has just gone purple Sector 2. It's another good lap from the Papaya McLaren, and he's about 3 tenths off at the moment, so we'll see what he can do in Sector 3, but he's looking pretty aggressive. A big slide. He's gone wide in the penultimate corner. That will have cost him a tenth and a half. Going through the last corner now, a bit of understeer from the car. It's not the best last sector. We'll see where it ends up.
No, it's a bit untidy, but it's
they're doing this on purpose, I swear.
They're listening to us in the cockpit.
We're laughing because he's gone fastest. 1 minute 17.7. We could have been even better though, couldn't we, Jack? That's the thing.
Get someone else in. I'm clearly not right for the job.
Lando is using so much curb today. I know he was talking to his race engineer saying everything feels fine, not too bad, and he was talking about the bumping and the bottoming, but he is one who's really using the curb. I guess the McLaren is going to stand up to that, because in the past we've heard race engineers, especially at Mercedes, telling the Mercedes drivers to stay off the curbs, particularly in Austria, but different curbs, different tracks, different cars, I guess.
Yeah, there's always a limit. I mean, some drivers definitely prefer it using more curb than others, and Lando, as you say, has always been one of the guys that's been more aggressive. So that's clearly just part of his style. He likes to utilise that disturbance to the car to get it to rotate. Here's Ocon.
I almost crashed into Tsunoda there.
Okay, copy that. We'll just take a look at that.
Yeah, and that was in the pit lane. Wasn't that close, was it, Jack?
Pretty tame, yeah. I mean, Tsunoda started out of his box as Ocon was coming by, but then very quickly stopped because he was looking in his mirrors like any good driver should. So I think that's a bit of a non-event, really.
We'll wait and see what flashes up on the notice board, whether it's being investigated.
Yeah, the FIA will prove me wrong too now. 10-second penalty in practice.
It all seemed okay. Ocon going out then, building up speed. We have not had a lap from Esteban yet, so his first and still only Grand Prix victory here a couple of years ago from the 4th row of the grid. Pushing hard now though. It's back in 18th place, Ricciardo and Gasly, the only two behind him at the moment, but this looks pretty good. He's body language of the car looks pretty aggressive. He's taking to the curbs using them, which is a sign of confidence for sure, but it's not overstepping the mark. The car always looks under control. He's 2/10 down on Norris's time through the end of the second sector, so coming into this fiddly bit now through the final left and right turns. That run coming out of turn 13 off, forever associate with that move Nigel Mansell pulled off on Ayrton Senna to win in 1989. I've got a picture on my wall at home. I did when I was a kid, when he came from 12th on the grid in a dry race, so you can overtake at the Hungaroring, or you could in the 80s. And as they were lapping the Onyx, I know you'd be like, what's an Onyx? The Onyx of Stefan Johansson, he sprung past Ayrton Senna, got the lead of the race, and ended up winning by about 26 seconds, I think.
So an iconic move, that.
It was.
One for the ages, I think. If you haven't seen it, I recommend YouTube. But Ocon popping off into P3 there, 3.5 tenths off, so not a bad time from the Alpine. We're now getting a few other drivers coming in with a second set of tyres, like one of which is Ricciardo, who's just about to finish a lap on the soft, much like Tsunoda did earlier. This is a bit more reserved of a time. He's up to 10th, 118.3, which is, 4 tenths off his teammate? Yeah, so, so.
Yeah, Tsunoda in second place, still quicker than Daniel Ricciardo. Franz Tost watching on from the pit wall now, getting a replay here of a pretty massive lockup from Sergio Perez, dragging the front right Pirelli, one of the soft tyres, all the way across the tarmac and missing the apex by some distance. So a bit untidy. That's not going to do the tyres any good, is it?
That's a dead front right. It's not going to recover, I don't think. It'll be quite badly flat spotted, which is a shame because, as we've mentioned, they are quite limited on their tyre allocation this weekend, and we even got a slow-mo replay there of the car shaking as he drove away from the corner. Such was the vibration.
Yeah, indeed. So not the perfect day so far, I think it's fair to say, for him, particularly after what happened in the first session. And he's back in 15th place now as well, 1.2 seconds away from the absolute pace, because we don't know exactly what everybody's doing in free practice, what fuel loads they're running, how hard they're trying, we know which tyres they're on, but that is about it. But certainly not been a great start to the day. It's blue skies at the Hungaroring now, much better weather than we endured in the first practice session. The engine you can hear in the background is Pierre Gasly, who's just started a flying lap. Talk us through this, Alex, because he's just made his way down through turns 2 and 3, which is a steep downhill section. This middle part of the lap now is where you really need a good flow, isn't it? A good rhythm.
Yeah, and he's gone quicker than Norris through the first part of the lap, so it's a good start. Through turn 5, where Perez crashed earlier, all very smooth, carrying a lot of minimum speed. It's quite a fast hairpin. Through the chicane, just nibble the sausage curves, no more than that, otherwise it will disturb the car. Into the quick left-right chicane. That starts off the left-right, left-right, left-right. That is iconic of this middle part of the lap. Pitches it into turn 11 very, very fast. Bounces over the exit curb, bottoming out, but just about keeps it all square and under control. Little wiggle from the rear, going into turn 12 under braking, and into these very long 2 heifers to finish the lap, where you have to be very, very patient. He is no drama from the car in the penultimate corner, and in the final bend, all very smooth, easy on the power, and it looks quite nice and tidy.
Yeah, second quickest, absolute best in sector 3, so that puts him second. Jack, what was your favourite corner when you were driving around here in Formula Renault and Formula 3 and Formula 2?
Turn 11, that very quick right-hand to finish the second sector, because tyres are screaming. You've just been going bouncing like a pinball between the walls. It feels like, well, not literally, hopefully, but going left, right, all the way through that sequence where you're just working all the time, no moment to breathe, and you finish it off with the fastest corner on the circuit, where you can use a lot of exit curb on the way out, but you do bounce a lot over those curves. It always feels a little bit precarious, but yeah, great corner.
That's downhill as well, isn't it, into that
ever
corner?
So slightly, yeah.
And in a Formula One car, you're looking at about 132 miles an hour or so in the middle of the corner, that is, and well, 5th gear, 6th gear, depending on your setup. So yeah, it's, so you're telling me the brave corners, Jack, are the ones that you
they tend to be the most, yeah, eye-opening, that's for sure. You won't catch me saying that about a slow chicane.
No,
it's not quite the same thrill.
No, well, the chicane's pretty rapid here, isn't it? They rattle the curves through there.
Yeah, for a chicane.
No, not a fan.
I mean, every circuit needs a mix, right? And that's what makes places like Silverstone so enjoyable, is you get all the way through the speed range of the car. Whereas here, it does dominate in the medium speed corners, and that's why it's such a great test of the car, because it combines both getting mechanical grip out of the car, i.e. from the tyres and the chassis, and the downforce of the car. They're both working in those medium speed corners.
Oscar Piastri is in the garage out of the car with his helmet off at the moment. Lewis Hamilton's in the car, in the garage, but helmet on. Looks like he's ready to go back anytime soon. We've got 4 of the top 5 in the pits at the moment. Lando Norris, who's quickest with a 1 minute 17.701. Pierre Gasly out on track, still second, 0.2 of a second behind him. He's just pitted, actually, as I said that. Tsunoda in 3rd place, Ocon in 4th place, and Hülkenberg in 5th are all in the pits. Bottas is out there at the moment, he's in 6th place. And then Alonso, Zhou Guanyu, Max Verstappen and Lance Stroll rounding out the top 6. And to make your point about it being pretty close out there, there's only 0.6 of a second covering the top 12 at the moment, as we watch Charles Leclerc go on to a charging lap in the Ferrari with perhaps a bit of a question mark as to what's going to happen this weekend here for him, because he's not had a podium yet at this circuit. 4th is his best finish.
Yep, and I'm sure he'll not have any anything against the circuit, or rarely drivers do. It's just the way that things work out that he hasn't had a good result yet, so hoping to overturn that, I'm sure. It's true that the standings so far this session haven't really shaken out the way that we were expecting. It's still a relatively unrepresentative, I would say. We've got Norris leading, and then Alpines, AlphaTauris, Haas's up there, Alfa Romeos, and the Ferraris, Red Bulls, Mercedes, they haven't really shown up yet. Even Verstappen has set that first couple of laps on his soft and then didn't really improve that much. He did improve a little bit, but very quiet relatively for him so far. As I say that, the Ferrari of Leclerc on that new soft does then put in a more representative time, a 1:17.6, just a smidge faster than Norris.
A little bit of a problem for Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. He's sustained some damage to the floor, which needs repairing, so he's hoping to get back out there with 21 seconds, 20 seconds left on the clock. So we're talking about Lando Norris battering the curbs in the McLaren. Maybe Oscar Piastri battered them a little bit too much on his side of the garage.
Well, we have seen quite a lot of bottoming from the cars on the exit curbs of those faster corners, turn 4, turn 11. And while you can expect some of that as normal running wear and tear, yeah, if you catch them the wrong way, it can put a really bad shock through the chassis, and bits start to fall off, and that's no good.
Yeah, in fact, Lando Norris was talking about that on the team radio, wasn't he, earlier in the session, so it's happening, but it feels okay at the moment. It's obviously something they've got to keep an eye on. That was a pretty committed lap from Charles Leclerc, wasn't it? I was watching him go through through Maggotts and the Beckett's S's 2 weeks ago at Silverstone, and of all the drivers, I mean, they all looked pretty committed, but Charles looked like he was having to really push through there, but he wasn't relenting. He looked pretty brave through what's one of the quickest sequences of corners in the world. So there's no doubting his commitment, and that was a decent lap, actually, wasn't it, to put him top of the times? Yeah,
no, absolutely. And Charles is always one that seems to be putting it all on the line when he's in the car, so he's great to watch alongside Fernando that we were talking about earlier. We're now on board with George Russell, who's back on the medium tyre, and he seems to be doing a bit more of long-running style pace now, because he's not really backed off on this lap. He's kept pushing through onto a second lap, which you only really do if you're trying to see how the tyre's going to behave during the race. And now we jump on board with Carlos Sainz, who's also doing a lap on a new set of softs, so this is going to be a quick time from him as well, potentially.
just noticed we've got 7 different teams represented in the top 8 at the moment. So Ferrari quickest, McLaren second, an Alpine in third place, AlphaTauri fourth, another Alpine Ocon in fifth place, a couple of places behind his teammate Gasly. Then you've got Hülkenberg in the Haas, Bottas in the Alfa, and Alonso in the Aston. So nicely mixed up. Make for a good qualifying session, this, wouldn't it?
I dare say it's going to shake out a little bit more in this last 20 minutes or so. I think it'll be interesting though, because I'm not sure which teams will prioritise trying to get some long running in, which of course is the norm for FP2. But with this morning's session, this new tyre allocation, maybe they're changing their strategies a little bit with the running order of this practice. Andrew?
It looks like it to me. I was just thinking exactly the same thing, Jack. Normally what happens in second practice is that they do a sort of setup run, if you like, usually on the medium tyre, although some of the teams will split the drivers between the medium and the hard. Then everyone will do a sort of qualifying simulation run on the soft tyre, and then they go into the race simulation runs. That's not happening in the same way today, which is why we've got this mixed up top 8. So, Yuki Tsunoda is not going to qualify 4th. I think I can safely predict that, if it's dry anyway.
Writing that down now.
Yeah, exactly, thank you. Zhou Guanyu, I don't think he's going to qualify 9th in the Alfa Romeo. Carlos Sainz, well, he might be 10th in the Ferrari.
Just keep giving us predictions, and one of them is going to be wrong, Andrew.
Yeah, so... Verstappen is 11th at the moment. They've only done one run, and that was on the soft tyre, the Red Bulls. We've got Mercedes, Hamilton we're watching right now. Him and Russell are both out on the medium tyre at the moment, as they have been since the start of the session. And it's all the same set by the looks of it for Hamilton as well. So this alternate tyre allocation's definitely shaken things up, and it's making it really hard. I mean, Friday practice is difficult anyway to make any sort of strong predictions of form from, but the race simulation runs do normally give you a decent picture. Today, I just don't know what to say about what this means. I don't think it means anything, probably.
Do you not have to, at the Hungaroring, put more emphasis on qualifying, though, because track position is everything here?
Normally, yeah. It's just, I think that with the long run pace, people tend to show their hand a little bit more, and it seems to be, with it averaging out over a run, it's potentially less affected by drivers making little mistakes or holding back a little bit. I hope this doesn't mean that long run corner is going to be affected, because that's what we all come here for, really.
Well, producer Paddy will be very, very disappointed if that's the way it works.
He's not the only one.
But at the moment, I don't know what to do. There are no long runs to tell you about, although I'm beginning to track Russell on this run, because this looks like it might be a long run, and Hamilton's doing the same sort of lap time, but comparison between the Mercedes drivers is not really what you want.
I'll take that over nothing. Moving on. So that
don't know how we deal with that kind of disappointment on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I don't want him to defend himself any further and get out of this. So watching on board with Charles Leclerc, who's just having a bit of a tangle with one of the Alpines, who decided to come out at pretty much the same time. He shakes his head, but I'm not sure if there was a lot that could be done about that situation.
That was the Ferrari coming down the pit lane and then finding an Alpine coming out right in front of him, but no harm done. I think a couple of close calls in the pit lane.
It is uncharacteristically tight, this pit lane. We've seen a few drivers being very ginger with their front wings turning out of their box.
Right, Max Verstappen is just starting a flying lap. On the way into turn 1 he goes, slows the car down from around about 190 miles an hour, and then downhill now into the second of the DRS zone. The first one is the start-finish straight. The second one is that downhill run between turns 2 and 3. Into 3 he goes now, spiralling downhill. White flag being shown by one of the marshal posts ahead, because there is a slow Ferrari that's told to get out of the way, which it does duly, and Verstappen now goes through, and he's a tenth and a half down through the first sector on Leclerc.
Yeah, he's definitely pushing on a little bit more than when we first saw him earlier in this session. He's trying to get the most out of the car, getting a little bit of understeer through some of the slower speed corners earlier on. We jump up to the helicopter shot now, so a little bit less sure of what's going on inside the cockpit, which is a shame, but he flies through turn 11 using all of the track on the entry and the exit. It's very, very brave of the curbs there, but it's not yielded a very quick sector 2 time. He's half a second down now.
And he's on the soft tyre as well, Verstappen, so personal best through sector 1, but he lost 2.5 tenths or so through the middle sector. He's about to make his way out through turn 14, goes right to the edge of the road, goes up through the gears to 8th, goes across the line, and he's 0.734 seconds adrift, a 1 minute 18.4, so he stays down out of the top 10, currently in 11th place.
I think that is the same set that he started the session on, so at least it's not a brand new set for him that is uncharacteristically not giving him the grip that he would expect. So I'm not sure. He's only got 15 minutes or so left in this session. There is time to go in and stick another set on, but with so little time left in the session and such a tight allocation, I'd be surprised if they did that. They'll probably just run out this set and save the proper quali sims for FP3.
Getting busier track now. Gasly, Hulkenberg both out there. Perez has gone back out as well, but unlike his teammate, he's gone for the yellow sidewall tyre, the medium tyre on this one. So he's just finding a bit of track space at the moment to try and build up a lap now as he comes out of the left-hander at the penultimate corner, turn 13. Still looks like he's building up a little bit as he goes out of turn 14. Will he pull the trigger now and go on to a quick lap? He's about to start one. So out he goes, one of the Aston Martins behind, which is Fernando Alonso. So Perez then on the medium goes down into turn 1, trying to get somewhere near his teammate Max Verstappen, who's 11th.
I apologise, it was a new set of softs for Max Verstappen, at least if our tyre tracker is correct, so that's quite surprising. But yeah, we'll see what happens with the medium. We'll get somewhat of a comparison between the two Red Bulls here. Perez going through the first sector without any major dramas, flying up through turn 4. He's 4 tenths down on Leclerc. That's an extra couple of tenths off of what Verstappen managed. Big sparks flying up off the car as he grounds out on the exit curves of 4 and 5 through the bumpy, twisty, tight little chicane that comes in the middle of the lap into turns 9 and 10. And it's again not looking too bad, but we'll see as he comes across the sector 2 line where he stands in comparison to the fastest lap.
Looking to beat 55.5 if indeed he's going for a out-and-out quick lap time. Certainly looks like from the body language like he is, but he's 9 tenths of a second down at the end of sector 2, Perez. So coming into the last sequence of corners now, out through 13 into 14, he drags the car from the right to the left into this right-hander, which winds its way almost like a big sweeping hairpin back onto the start-finish line. Over the grid hatching as he goes, over the line he goes, but he's 1.36 seconds adrift, and he doesn't improve at all on that lap, which is about just under a tenth slower than his best lap so far.
They did invite, I don't know if people managed to watch the broadcast, but there was a poor little kid who was absolutely distraught that Checo was in the wall on the first lap of practice, and the Red Bull have very kindly invited him and his guardian into the box, which I thought was nice.
Yeah, nice touch that, wasn't it? So it's good to see. Lewis Hamilton out on track now as well. One of the things, and everybody else thinks about this, and I'm in the Lando Norris camp with this, one of the things I'm disappointed about this weekend is that we haven't got that chrome back on the side of the McLaren, because I thought that looked fantastic.
I wish that they just fully committed to it. I know there are sponsor obligations and all of that, but I was really hoping they'd do the full chrome circa 2008 style McLarens. That they did look amazing.
It looked awesome, didn't it? Absolutely right. I thought they might have kept it because of a bit of a good luck symbol at Silverstone, wasn't it? Replay of Zhou Guanyu rattling the curbs, and that was on the way out of turn 2 down to 3.
Wide into turn 4. Should be okay. Just to the after. Copy, Joe. We're checking.
So check the floor. I went wide into turn 4. It should be okay though. So it's definitely something they're concerned about here, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's a combination, this track, of quite a smooth surface, because it has been resurfaced fairly recently in its history, which makes for a surface that you can run quite aggressive ride heights on. And of course, aerodynamics, downforce, very important. The lower you can get, the better. But then it's also punctuated by curves that are relatively usable at this track, and the drivers do like to clatter them. So you're in a situation where you want to run the car low, but then the drivers are smashing the floor against the curbs everywhere, because they like to use all of the track and then some. So yeah, I think all the teams are a bit concerned. The other thing for Guanyu was when he went wide there on the AstroTurf, of course, that Astro does hold a lot of moisture quite long after rain has been and gone. So he let right off the throttle as soon as he got onto that part of the track, quite wisely, because he just didn't want to risk any wheel spin kicking up and sending him into the wall.
Yeah, very good spot that, very good point. But he survives.
Just intrigued by Daniel Ricciardo's performance in this session. He's just gone back into the pits after a couple of laps, and he's away off his teammate Yuki Tsunoda, who's up in 4th. Daniel Ricciardo down in 14th. What is the game plan here? Is it still just finding his way? Why are we not seeing the Daniel Ricciardo, as Andrew said, of Red Bull days or even of McLaren days right now? I'm not sure which Daniel Ricciardo we're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously relatively early days still. I think everyone's watching him very, very closely, as we are, because it's an interesting storyline at the end of the day. He's not settled in straight away. I think what the Red Bull bosses are going to be looking for, if they are considering swapping him into that Red Bull seat anytime soon, they want to see him beating Tsunoda. I think they would expect that for someone that they're going to put into that second Red Bull seat. Tsunoda hasn't lived up quite to expectations, otherwise he would have been the one going in, not Checo. So yeah, it's too early to definitively say, but yeah, 4/10 off your teammate is a decent chunk.
Yeah, Tsunoda, we'll see what he's made of as well with all this talk around him. We talked about other drivers feeling pressure, Ricciardo feeling pressure, Perez feeling pressure, but he's going to feel some as well. A very popular driver though, isn't he? I mean, he's the only driver I know who's got his own chant when you get to Silverstone. He goes on the stage and talks to everybody. And we get team radio from Sargent.
Report of rain, sector 2, small amount.
Bit of rain in sector 2 is the team radio on at Williams. Hard to see from the pictures. It's a little bit greyer overhead though, isn't it, by the looks of it?
Yeah, just looks like a sprinkle, if anything. I mean, I feel like you always have to be very careful when you're an engineer telling your driver that, because you don't want to unnerve the driver if it is just a very light drizzle, because if it's very light drizzle, so hot are the tyres and track in these conditions that it will just evaporate instantly and it doesn't affect the grip, even if you get a little bit of rain on your visor. So you don't want to spook the driver too much, but then you have to let him know just in case the radar isn't quite right and it's a downpour.
Yeah, I suppose it always looks worse when you're in the car and you're going at that speed and the tiny bit of rain looks like it's actually properly raining. Yeah,
when you're doing 200 miles an hour, those drops come at you quite quickly, don't they?
Do you know, I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't advise you to try it on the way home.
George Russell with his sweat and his visor, it's all going on in the cockpit there.
Sweat on his visor?
He thought it was raining, didn't he?
Yeah,
what, his own sweat was on his visor?
He was calling in the fact that it was raining, and his engineer was saying, I think it's actually just you sweating in your helmet.
He needs to try the Rosberg trick. Do you know that one?
Tell us.
Tampon on the forehead.
That'd be nice.
Not a word of a lie, yeah. And I can see why, yeah.
Yeah.
George should give it a go, clearly. He's quite a prolific sweater. Anyway, moving on. Sargent is doing a lap now. He's still on the medium tyre, or he has switched onto the medium tyre rather, having been on the soft earlier this session. Just collecting some data from the looks of it, because his first sector is pretty steady, so this has all the hallmarks of a long run really about it.
Yeah, and it's just to show how the pace has moved on since Logan Sargent was top of the times. He hasn't improved his own time when he was on the softs. He was fastest, he's now 17th, albeit only 1.1 seconds off the best time in this second free practice session. We're watching an onboard picture at the moment from the Williams driver, the American, in his first season of Formula One, still looking for his first points, but making pretty good strides forward at Silverstone a couple of weeks ago. Just completes the second sector, but 4.9 seconds down, so this is not a quick lap at the moment. So you're right about the long run.
Yeah, he's just he seems to be struggling a little bit with the front end of that car. It's just sliding across the surface, and you can always already see a little bit of marking on those front tyres from where they're effectively you're ripping little bits of surface rubber off and they're rolling across what we call graining. And the result of that was he was getting to mid-corner, not having rotated the car enough and trying to get back on power, and then the rear starts sliding around on you as well. So it's a little bit of a tough drive there at the moment for Sargent.
Yeah, it looks to be. And the Haas out there as well. Kevin Magnussen, who's not in the good books with Oscar Piastri, because it was his blown engine on the Wellington straight 2 weeks ago that brought out a safety car. Really cost Oscar the chance of a podium, wasn't it?
Timing is everything. Timing is everything. Just talking about Logan Sargent, I was interested to hear him responding to a question put to several of the drivers yesterday in the press conferences by a journalist asking what they would have done if they weren't Formula One drivers. And it's maybe a little telling. Logan Sargent said, I don't really want to be thinking about that at this point. And I suppose when you see one rookie go, you think, cripes, if one's gone, are my team looking at me thinking I'm not performing? And yes, I can imagine as a rookie at the moment, you're sort of desperately pulling your socks up and hoping that no one's going to go, oh, hang on, Nick de Vries is gone, maybe you're next one. I don't think Williams are like that. I don't think the Red Bull way is the Williams way necessarily.
Yeah, traditionally not, but I certainly think that Logan will be thinking about it. He'll be quite conscious of it. In a way, he's been a bit lucky that he's not actually been, if you like, the centre of attention, because we have had these other rookies and these other things going on the grid. But he is under scrutiny, and certainly if not this year, then next year his seat is in question. And even though he has quite a decorated teammate in Alex, he still has to perform, and he's still probably more a ways off the pace of Alex than would be expected for a rookie. So, and, you know, add into that the numerous errors that he's made, the damage that he's caused to the car in a few places. So, yeah, he'll definitely be feeling the pressure, I think, as well.
Looks like Oscar Piastri on an out lap, so he had the problem with the underside of the car, the damage to the floor, and having sat out quite a long part of this practice session, he's on an out lap now, so the McLaren back out. Interesting bottom three at the moment. Perez 18th, Piastri 19th, and Russell 20th. Not necessarily three you'd expect to be down the order. I know it's only free practice, but still, it's always nice to be at the top of the times, isn't it? Whatever session as a driver, just for confidence.
And for us to read into.
I was going to say, get the headlines ready for Perez again. Of course, I think we're all expecting a more representative order come quali, but yeah, it has been an odd session, hasn't it? An odd day in all here at Hungarian.
Fred Vasseur talking on the Ferrari pit wall, and an improvement upon the results from Silverstone, that's for sure. They ended up having 3 pit stops for Charles Leclerc here last year as well, so quite a strategy right for him here last year. So they need a push. We'll get Hamilton's radio.
I got no grip, mate. Nicholas's long run data is very useful. Others look like they're having similar issues.
That's interesting because we do have quite a soft set of compounds here with us this weekend, the softest that are available to Pirelli. You'd think that these cooler conditions, with the green track potentially as well, still with the rain earlier this morning, that's where the softer compounds would tend to work. But clearly, people are not really happy with them, and it does look like a lot of other drivers are slipping and sliding and dealing with that. So, but I think now is a fantastic time to go over to long run corner with Andrew Benson, the moment you've all been waiting for. I know you've suffered through 55 minutes of FP2 just for this, so here we go. Andrew Benson.
Long run corner with Andrew Benson.
Well, I do have some interesting information, actually, Jack. It's they're not all on the same tyre, unfortunately, and I'm going to sort of waffle a little bit because Ferrari and Red Bull have just started running on the softs. I've only got 2 laps of data from them so far, but I'll try and add their 3rd lap into this data as we go along. But I've got comparisons between Mercedes, Aston Martin and McLaren, all on the medium tyre, and guess who's fastest? Lando Norris. Quite significantly, actually. He's averaging 1 minute 23.637 on the medium on quite a long run. Fernando Alonso 23.803 in the Aston Martin, and Lewis Hamilton 23.824. So very, very close between the Aston Martin and the Mercedes, with the Aston Martin just edging it, but Norris a couple of tenths quicker than both of them. Now on the Red Bull and Ferrari, so I've only got 2 laps of data. They're all Verstappen, Leclerc and Sainz all out on the soft tyre. Quite varying lap times. Leclerc, surprisingly, is the quickest on the first 2 laps by quite some margin. He's got 3 tenths over Verstappen, and I don't know what Sainz is playing at because he's 6 tenths further back from that. But that's quite encouraging for Ferrari, but it's only 2 laps on the soft tyre. So we don't know how their degradation is going to go, and that's been their big problem. But it does suggest that the Ferrari is properly competitive here and in Hungary, and could be Leclerc's not had a pole since Baku. It's the only person who's not had a pole, or only time Red Bull's not been on pole all year. Could he be a contender based on that data tomorrow for pole position?
I feel better now for having had that. I don't know about you guys.
I'm still loving the ringtone. This is going to be my ringtone when we get that jingle there downloaded.
Andrew sings along. You just can't hear him until we get into the long run data proper.
No, interesting that. So yeah, I mean, Norris has looked pretty good when he's gone out for one lap. He's looked pretty good when he's gone out for more than one lap. To get a replay on the screen, we're looking at a George Russell all over the curbs, sparks flying from the back of the Mercedes, the man that was on pole position here last year and was quickest in the wet free practice one session earlier on today. I noticed they were bolting some soft tyres onto Perez's car. He's stone last now, so is he going to go out and have a qualifying tight run in the last 2 minutes?
Yes, I mean, as we were saying, 2 laps of data is quite a limited shot into what would be a full stint come Sunday, because the driving that you do in the first couple of laps and the amount that you take out of those tyres can have a massive effect on how things play out later. So obviously we hope that there's going to be a fight and that Ferrari will be as strong as they look right now. It could be that Leclerc is just a bit hotter out the gate, Max just preserving those tyres a bit more, and they'll come back to him over the next 10, 15, 20 minutes if he were to keep running. But I'm quite surprised that they've left it so late and to gather so few laps, and this is the kind of data that is really crucial for them come Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely right. Just a minute left in the session now, and Fernando Alonso makes his way on medium tyres in the Aston Martin down the pit lane and comes into his box and practice pit stop for the team here now, which is another key factor as they run through the procedures during practice sessions. So that will look good. They switch him on to soft tyres. Out he goes again. That will look very slick from the Aston Martin team, and he rejoins out on track now. Andrew.
I've got a little bit more data, a couple more laps from Ferrari and Red Bull, and it looks like Jack is some kind of soothsayer out of that, or he's been watching Formula One a lot, just like we all have. So Leclerc's times have dropped off massively on his next 2 laps. From running in the low 23.0 on his first 2 laps, he's gone into the 23.8 on his next lap, then a 23.9. Whereas Verstappen has gone 23.6, 23.3, 23.2, 23.1. So he's now quite considerably quicker on average than the Ferrari, as you would expect from Max Verstappen. And Carlos Sainz's times have been a bit more stable, but he's still slower than the pair of them. But his and Leclerc's times are now more comparable with each other overall. So, unsurprisingly, usual picture, Red Bull miles ahead, at least in Verstappen's case. And then we don't know how Ferrari compare with the McLaren, Mercedes, Aston Martin battle behind them, but looks like similar picture behind, with maybe McLaren edging it on the evidence of today, followed by Aston and Mercedes. Ferrari, we don't know.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, it looks like it could be wide open, perhaps for every position except pole position when we get to qualifying tomorrow. But the weather plays its part as well. We've had the checkered flag for still some drivers out there on push laps, but quite a few have taken the checkered flag now, including Charles Leclerc, who looks like he's going to end the session quickest in the Ferrari. Pierre Gasly just takes the flag. Good session for Pierre in 3rd place. In fact, both the Alpines up there, 3rd and 5th in that session. Just about 0.2 of a second away from the best time of the Ferrari was Pierre Gasly in that session. So we get an aerial shot now of the circuit, and already the grandstand's absolutely packed at the Hungaroring. When they opened this circuit for the first time in 1986, had a record crowd of 200,000, which was a record that stood for a decade. So it's always a well-attended Grand Prix, this one.
Lots of people enjoying their Friday action. 2 sessions, and Charles Leclerc fastest in that second one. Plenty to sort of mull over as we head into Saturday, I think, guys.
Yeah, I'm interested in Perez's session here as well, because after initially running along a similar plan to Max and the other Red Bull, he really didn't do that much at the end and was in the pits for quite an extended period of time. He came out briefly on the medium, came straight back in, and he's now gone back out to take the checker flag so that he can do the practice starts, which happen at the end of the session here at the Hungaroring. But it's not a lot of laps for the Red Bull crew today. I know Max has obviously gone well, but Perez, you'd expect he wants to be out there a bit more.
Yeah, exactly right. And want to sort of put the softs on towards the end. I thought he was going to have a push lap, but it never happened. So at the end of the session, Charles Leclerc, top of the times in free practice 2 with a 1 minute 17.786. He was only 15 thousandths of a second quicker than Lando Norris, though, in the McLaren. And then there's a gap of 0.2 of a second back to Pierre Gasly, who was 3rd. And the best of the Alpines, and then Yuki Tsunoda as some of the cars make their practice starts on the line. Yuki Tsunoda, a good session in 4th 4th place. Esteban Ocon in 5th place. Nico Hulkenberg slightly under the radar in that session. We didn't see much of him, but 6th quickest. Valtteri Bottas was 7th. Fernando Alonso in 8th. Zhou Guanyu in 9th, Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari in 10th place, Max Verstappen in 11th place in that session. Read into that what you want. And then Lance Stroll was 12th. Alex Albon, who was quickest earlier in the session, ended up 13th. Daniel Ricciardo on his return to racing this weekend, 14th in free practice 2. Kevin Magnussen 15th, Lewis Hamilton in 16th place, and then behind him just was Sargent, who was quickest early on, 17th. Perez was 18th. Piastri had damage to the car in the middle of the session, was 19th, and George Russell, who was top of the times in free practice 1, is bottom of the times in free practice 2.
So that completes all the action at the Hungaroring this afternoon. We've had our 2 practice sessions. We will meet again for FP3 tomorrow. We will be here from 11:25 to talk you through that. And of course, then qualifying in the afternoon. We'll start our coverage at 5 to 3. So you'll be able to find out who will start Sunday's Hungarian Grand Prix from pole position. My thanks to the BBC F1 writer Andrew Benson, who's furiously tapping away, getting his article ready after all that excitement around long runs. Jack Aitken as well, and Chris Hartley will be back tomorrow for FP3. Hopefully you can join us then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.